We will be making a walkthrough on how to invert your NR200, but I'd really love to see coolermaster revise this case with an update to make the top mount radiator a little more approachable to the everyday user. So, the people have spoken, and with coolermaster on the cusp of releasing the NR200P MAX variant, we thought it would be the perfect time to revisit what's arguably one of the best ITX cases on the market today. And we'll walk through the inversion mod, which to me really makes this case shine. So first, let's hop into the mod, and then later we can compare the finished product to what the MAX variant has to offer, and the pros and cons that come along with that. So how hard is it? Well, it was actually a lot easier than I was expecting. And as long as you're proficient with basic power tool usage, it should be a walk in the park for you. However, it should be noted that this mod isn't as reversible as just unscrewing something and reverting it back. It is semi-permanent and would involve re-riveting or using some self-drilling screws to reattach certain metal pieces back together if you wanted to revert the invert. So, big fat asterisk before we get into the mod. If you have a Gen 4 capable GPU, and you also have a Gen 4 capable motherboard, which most new ones are now, and you're planning on using the Gen 3 riser cable that comes with the NR200P, then you need to get your computer partially built, powered up, the GPU slotted directly into the motherboard, go into your BIOS and change the setting for PCIe devices to be Gen 3 capable. Because if not, then you won't get any video output through your GPU. Now, if you have integrated graphics in your CPU, not that big of a deal. But if you don't happen to have that, like I don't, then you'll just end up taking your computer apart like way too many times. I can't tell you how many times I've accidentally saved the wrong profile on the BIOS, or accidentally reset it, or had to update my BIOS and it changed my profile back and I lost that Gen 3 setting. Which means I had to rip this bad boy apart and put the GPU back directly into the motherboard because I don't have a Gen 4 riser cable. Now, the basic concept of the mod here is to flip the front plate of the case. This puts your case's USBs, reset switch, and power button point up in our new orientation when we flip the case upside down. This is possible because the top and bottom of the case are interchangeable. So, in order to flip the front panel of the case, there are 3 small rivets that are holding the front panel onto the side bracket. Now, you have to drill those out and then bend a small piece of metal so that you can flip the front and it will still mate up on the other side of the case. I drilled the 3 rivets out, unscrewed all 4 corners where the front plate attaches to the internal frame, and flopped that puppy around. Now, this is also where I cut a small corner in my mod. Other guides will tell you to file the motherboard bracket down to fit on the left side of the front plate because of this little lip in the metal. I, however, did not have immediate access to a metal file, and since I was doing this in my dining room, I didn't really want a bunch of metal shavings all over it anyways. So I just used a small pair of pliers to bend the lip back on the front plate, and then added a small self-tapping screw for a little internal rigidity. Now, is this the prettiest and most professional way to do it? No. But since you never see it, I decided that it met my standards and I let it fly. So I reinstalled the front plate, reattaching it on all 4 corners of the frame, and then it was good to go. Now, the last step that you'll have to do on this inversion mod is you'll take the small black plastic clips that hold the toolless side panels in and move them from what's now the bottom of the case into the top, so that the side panel can click in on the bottom and click together into the case. Now, why did coolermaster include extra slots for these black plastic clips? I don't know, but I'm not going to question it. It allows the inversion mod to happen and the side panels to still click in like they should. Now, if you go to install a 240mm radiator on the top, like I'm sure you would because you're doing this mod, then you'll notice that the 8 holes to attach the radiator to that top plate don't exactly line up. This is because coolermaster designed the top plate to actually just hold 2 120mm fans with some space between them. But if you remove the little rubber rings that are designed to hold those stock fans, you'll notice that the larger holes give us the wiggle room we need in order to make all the screws fit to the radiator. once you install all 8 screws, it does hold nice and tight despite the larger holes. So NR200, NR200P inversion mod. Why? Why is it so popular to flip this case and go through all the hassle just to turn it upside down? Well, it allows for top-mounted 240 AIOs. And this is better because typically you want the radiator to be installed above where your CPU is. That way you don't get air bubbles trapped in your water pump. Now, not all 240 AIOs have the pump in the CPU water block, but most of them do. So this is a more ideal layout. Also, it allows for placement of the NR200 on the left side of your desk while still giving you a view through the tempered glass side panel, which I think is ideal for right-handed people, especially if they have a low amount of desk space and don't want to give up their mouse room or compromise by having to shove their pretty computer under their desk. And for that reason, some of you might want to do the inversion mod even though you don't want to water cool, because you just prefer to have your computer on the left side of your desk. So, as you might have noticed during the B-roll, I made a few other tweaks to the layout of my components. So I moved the power supply from one of the original locations just to the front of the case. And this allows me to have a side exit exhaust where the power supply used to be mounted. Now this is especially perfect because I was able to get a 3060 Ti Founders Edition card, which is a blow-through style GPU. So all the hot air from that can get blown directly out of the case. Yes, the fan is mounted with zip ties. Yes, it works great. And with the addition of that side exit exhaust, brings me up to a total of 5 120mm case fans. I've got it set up where my AIO is pulling fresh air down through it from the top and then exhausting out the bottom 2 fans and the side exit. So it's basically like a reverse chimney style. And I did this because I noticed that when I had it exhausting hot air up, it was pulling a lot of that heat from the GPU straight up through my radiator, which was leading to significantly increased CPU temp. So this reverse chimney gives me fresh air on the CPU, and the GPU isn't really struggling for air either. Now the way I set this up with the power supply in the front, there's really not that much room past the GPU, so you couldn't go with anything larger than maybe a 3070 Founders because it is the same style cooler, and you'd be kind of hard pressed to get any 3-fan GPU in with this layout. Now, one of the major cons of this layout is that it really shows off how little space for cable management there is in this case. There's no hidden back section or basement that allows you to shove all the cables into. It's pretty out in the open. So I tried my best to zip tie the cables where I could, use tie wire, and kind of be conscious of where I was placing them, but I mean, it's not perfect. You can see them. They're there. The only place that you really have some leniency is behind the front panel of the case. And that is where I have pretty much everything I could fit shoved. Now, I'm not saying that this is the ideal layout for anyone with an NR200P, but for myself personally and my components, also wanting to have it on the left side of my desk so that I can actually see those components, I think it does make the most sense. Now, like I mentioned earlier, Coolermaster is coming out with a max variant of their NR200P. Now what this max variant means is that it comes with a 280mm AIO pre-installed in the top of the case. It also comes with a matching Coolermaster 850 watt 80 plus gold standard power supply. That also adds considerably onto the price tag of the case. For the NR200P, typically it's about $130 if you want the tempered glass side panel and all that. And for the NR200P MAX variant, we're looking at around $350 before import taxes and freight and stuff like that. And while that might sound like a huge increase over $130 to $350 plus, if you think about it, it's actually a really good deal. At least on the surface. Obviously, we still need to see reviews of all these components and see how they actually stack up compared to the competition. But you look at it as in the case is $130 and you're really only paying $220 extra, and that includes both the water cooler and the power supply. And did I mention that you get a Gen 4 riser cable? Yes! No more going into BIOS and being stuck with no video output from your GPU because somehow you always forget to change that. Not that I would know anything about that or anything. But I will say it doesn't seem like it's an all-around improvement from the NR200P. For example, it only has support for vertically mounting the GPU. You can't mount it horizontally directly into the motherboard. Now, this seems like it's not that big of a deal, but that means you are pretty much blocked out from using any air cooling for your CPU. For some people, that might be a deal breaker. I know there's a large part of the ITX community that loves to do air cooling, and that's really not a thing with the NR200P MAX. But I do think that the Max variant of the NR200P seems like it's a great option for anyone wanting to get into the ITX scene, but doesn't want to worry about compatibility and whether the components are all going to fit together, because you've pretty much got the sky as your limit, not having to worry about cooling. So do I think it's going to be a great case? Yeah, I do. But before we go out giving any ham stamps of approval, we'll want to see a firm out-the-door price and a little bit more info on the components and how they actually stack up to the competition. Anyways, thanks for watching our video. Let us know if you're going to mod an NR200P or maybe wait a little bit to see how the Max variant compares. Again, my name's Taylor with the Hardware Hams. Hope you have a great day. Bye! Hello? It was a scammer.